And so I guess with the way your mind works and everything you'd been doing at college and all your interests, I imagine getting that first bite, you must have thought, I can improve this thing.
No doubt. Which, you know what? So it's crazy, but man, it's unbelievable, Nigel, where we are, where we were then, and the motivation, the things that motivated me to like kind of dive into that problem and kind of where we are now. Because I feel like for a while, like the bike industry was, I feel like we've really gotten back to like the things that motivated me to get into it. So like, was, I was buying all the magazines, like everything, just like all of us, like literally every freaking thing I could possibly consume, mountain bike related. I was, involved. I was in it.
Yeah.
And I remember, we used to get mountain bike action here in the States, and Specialized had some ads about it's like the FSR, it's, awesome. And, it'll make you a peanut butter sandwich or, it's all kinds of crazy claims, and it had like, it had like whatever, their horse link, but it had like this straight line and it was like vertical axle path. And I'm like, all right, well, like, I don't know really shit about bike suspensions. And I don't really, we didn't have like a ton of like, linkage, kinematic linkage classes or anything in school. I think we had like one, everything I had dealt with was through vehicle, the vehicle dynamics side of things, which you don't really need, kinematic stuff. But I do know from that one class that I took that straight line motion is like really hard to achieve and really you need a complicated linkage to do it. So I knew just by looking at that thing that there's no way it could make a straight line. And I'm like,
So
all right, well, like if these guys are like one of the, supposedly the top companies and they don't know what the hell their shit doing, like who does?
yeah.
I'm like, I gotta figure this out. And that's it. I started working on the problem, just trying to understand it. And dude, at that point, there were so many insane theories. Kind of we're kind of back to that now where like anybody can basically say anything and it's
Yeah.
basically like no way to disprove it. It's just like, oh, I'll just say some crazy shit. And like that's now gospel because I wrote it on my
Yeah.
Instagram with, 500,000 followers. Like,
Yeah.
like it was so hard to navigate. Like again, consuming everything, reading everything, and in my mind, everyone's an expert. Like I'm just trying to learn, and it's like, dude, I got dragged down the wrong. It took me like really resetting and stepping back and being like, okay, like well, I just got to start from the ground up. Forget about everything I've read. Forget about everything that you know
Mhm.
people have talked about. Things that might make sense out of the from the very beginning when you start to look at like the probably remember in the back in the day, like putting the pivot on the chain line was like a big one. Pivot on the chain line or like instant centers and stuff. And it's like none of that stuff is real,
Yeah.
not even close. But like if you think about it, like first order innately as like somebody who isn't like doing this every day, like it passes the smell test close enough, makes sense. So like it was so hard to like forget everything you thought you knew, and that's
Yeah.
it.
And what like what in those so what year was that when you got the Santa Cruz, would you say?
98,
98.
somewhere it was early 98.
Yeah. So I guess at that time in
Maybe,
the
maybe 99, Nigel, somewhere in that range. It was pre
okay.
2000 for sure.
So around that era, you had the Intense M1, which
Yep.
was a bike that was thought to be a really good
Yep.
bike. I rode one of those in '99 for the first
Oh
time.
yeah.
Obviously, lots of other brands that did big brands, now that didn't have their own bikes. Rebadged in Intense.
Yeah.
You had like the Sun bikes, which is Max Commensal now.
Yep.
They had some crazy designs. There was quite a few what to us looked like crazy suspension designs from random sort of European companies that were
Yeah.
doing all the
Crazy.
World Cups. What what was the first sort of bike that you saw that you thought might work really well? Would you say, or
I'd say
was
the DHR2 probably. So that was the big three in the US were really the M1, the DHR, and Carpiel's Disco, which all of three I had friends that had all of them. And there was a lot of Balfas and stuff around where we were, but that was like I mean, I don't know. I remember the first time I rode a Balfa, high pivot Balfa, and I was like, all right, this thing does some cool stuff, but it also does some really wacky stuff.
no?
Um and like, but I think the DHR was really the best of the bunch at that time.
Okay.
It rode really well. It was probably too stiff, but it rode well. The M1s were great. And I think a big reason why they were great You had one suspension setting that worked, right? It was basically the lowest setting, was the only one, the lowest BB was the only one that, so we all put it in. But
Yeah.
the bike was had a good amount of flex. Like it was a flexy bike in a good way, I think. And I
Yeah.
think like that's a big reason of like why it was, why it rode as well as it did compared to like, the Disco was a crazy bike. I don't
Mhm.
know if you ever rode one of those back in the day, but
Um,
crazy like inchworm when you're on the pedals. Like it was, but it was crazy. It was cool because you could like manual that thing awesome because it would just like get into this like pocket and you'd be like in this like little pocket kind of.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
DHR was a machine for sure.
Okay. And then so from there, did you start thinking, I want to, have a job in the bike industry? How did that sort
Oh,
of first come about, or what was what were you
yeah.
doing?
It's so at that point in time, like I was big into dirt jumping. Like I got huge into dirt jumping in the Boston area, being in school and stuff. Like it was just kind of what we would go do for fun.
Yeah.
And our trails, so it was kind of every weekend we're off, racing slalom and downhill. Like I'll borrow a downhill bike. So I'll borrow a buddy's M1. I would borrow my old buddy's old Foes Weasel, a 6-inch bike. Like my first DH bike I did on a borrowed Weasel with like a 4-inch fork, double
Yeah.
crown 4-inch fork. Crazy.
Right. Brilliant.
Unreal. Uh, but we were big into dirt jumping, big into riding street, just in Boston, like literally just riding urban, jumping stair sets and jumping
Yeah.
off buildings and whatever, anything you could find to
Yeah.
jump off of,
Yeah.
trying to grind rails and breaking your ankles, just like all kinds of stupid shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so kind of concurrently, like I decided I needed to the best trail, the best dirt jumps that, or the ones that I liked the most were kind of far out into the woods. They were like a mile into the woods. And like riding a 20-inch bike out there sucked, dude. Like it was just tread. It was painful.
Yeah.
The bikes were so heavy back then, street bikes and dirt jumping bikes, they weighed a ton. And I was like, gonna build a freaking 26-inch wheel dirt jumping bike. Like, I don't care. But I can ride enough cross country on it to get out to the trails and do a little bit of the trail loop and then go jump and add a little more loop and go back to the car.
Yeah.
And that was like late 90s.
Yeah.
Um, which is insane to like think of where that sport like went from there, but like, and kind of being on the ground floor of building like, 26-inch wheeled like jumping bikes and then like what it is now is it's like unbelievable. Like,
Yeah. But it was a big thing in that time, wasn't it? I remember basically well, for me anyway, I kind of had a downhill bike, and then I had like a jump bike we used to
yeah,
call it,
yeah. It was basically us, Planet X, and like 24 bikes out of France. So the only like ones on the market.
Yeah.
And the Planet X's were just like a cross country bike out of Taiwan that was just, with a short seat tube. It was like those things were,
Yeah.
but it was wild. It's wild. But so we started off, that was like the first bike that I designed and I spent way too much time. But concurrently to that, um, that the race season in like, I want to say it was 2001, maybe 2001 on the East Coast, dude. It rained every freaking weekend.
Yeah.
Dude, every weekend was a mud race.
Yeah.
Every weekend.
Yeah.
And
I remember coming, I think 2001, I did I think that was the first year I got to do a few Norbers, and the ones on the East Coast were, yeah, it was chucking it down.
brutal, brutal. And they used to, line the courses with like hay bales, and the hay would be in the race line, and like shit's everywhere. And like, dude, chain guides were a disaster. Like back then, you had Mr. Dirts and MRPs, neither of which, if you even looked at with a little bit of mud, both of them would just lock up. And then as soon as it locks up, you're like pounding rocks and the fucking thing's all bent and mangled and they're like, you're over, Dale. And I was like, this is stupid. And I literally went home after a frustrating race weekend at Platikill where like me and like everybody I knew bent our chain guides. And I straight up just could not afford to spend another $200 on another MRP. I just couldn't keep buying them. I was out of
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
It's like, I got to build something that's going to not clog up with mud and is going to freaking keep the chain on. That's why I literally went to this kind of called the Nexus. It was like a rental machine shop, but I just knew the old guys that owned it, and they let me just go in there, and I just put the rotary table on the milling machine and started making stuff.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
And yeah, that became the first Evil guides, which then became E13, which kind of became every chain guide now. It's like they're all what that was back then.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
But it's crazy that like kids today have no understanding of like how shitty it was and how huge of a frustration like chain guides and drivetrain were, and like how massive of a thing it was to go from like literally something you had to deal with as the biggest annoyance ever every time you raced your bike to never having to think about it at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's I think, yeah, like you say, I think the you know the new generation, they just take that for granted because most of the stuff you can get now, it just kind of works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, derailleurs and stuff still break and stuff like that, but you know, chain guides, you know, from what you designed, and the bikes are just so much better than they were in those early days, aren't they? You know, and
Oh
last
yeah.
a lot
Oh,
better.
dude. Even derailleurs, like you mentioned, I mean, derailleurs are like 1,000 times better than they used to be.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
really are. I mean, like I was pretty convinced that gearboxes would be the future, and I abandoned that course, a decade ago. I mean, like they don't. I'm sure there's probably a spot for them, but and derailleurs are pretty darn good, bang for the buck. They're
Yeah.
pretty darn good.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, tell us a bit about the how did that change, you know, your course and like you know, in the industry for sure. Like when you did that first E13 chain guide, it just blew up, didn't it?
Instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we went from unknown. Well, so I'll back, Craig Hoyt, Skippy, remember him? He was the Sunrise Santa Cruz manager, like for well, back in the day, and he's been around for a long time. He I met him up at, I think it was at the Norba finals maybe in 2000 or so. Yeah, it must have been Norba finals in 2000. Um
Was that at Mount
and
Snow?
yeah, it's Mount Snow. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's funny, man. It's that was at the point where I was like starting to kind of consider like actually doing. I had a great job, an unbelievable like dream job. And,
Right.
like I would still go back and work that job. Like it's an incredible, incredible job.
Uh-huh.
And so like it was a big deal for me to even consider like not doing that because it paid really well and like I loved it and it was challenging and it was everything you would ever want. Um
And what were you
I
doing?
remember
What were you doing in that job, day to day sort of stuff?
what was I doing day to day was like special forces. It was DARPA stuff. Like it was basically robotics, advanced robotics for field deployable and advanced robotics stuff. So like battlefield robotics things like and some mission specific field deployable technology stuff. Like, it was really freaking cool
Wow.
and challenging. Like and I worked with some unbelievable people. Like it just I was like the only person in 1,000-person company that didn't have a master's. I was literally the first non-master's hire, I think.
Oh, well, brilliant.
I just got lucky, got recruited in and brought in, and I loved it. It was amazing. But I remember, watching the old videos, and there was some video that had like it had like Todd LeDuc and Voorhees in it and stuff. And I remember Todd LeDuc talking about like it was his first year racing, like on this video. I can't remember what video it was, but anyways, I saw him at that national. I went and found him and I talked to him, and I was like, dude, so like, was it worth it? Like, and he's like, this is the best thing I've ever done. He's like, it's been really hard, but like whatever. And like at that point I had like my own dream of like I wanted to design and build my own downhill bike and race it on the World Cup, on the Norbis stuff, and at that point World Cup wasn't quite, formed to what it is now, like
Yeah.
um
And you know, just for the some of the viewers that might not know, the Nova was a huge scene back then, wasn't it? You know, a lot of the World Cup guys would do the World Cup, but they'd also come and race the Nova scene as well.
yeah, Norba was, I mean, massive back then. It was definitely the show for sure. I mean, and the courses were, I mean, they were just huge, some of especially I think like back to the old Solemn courses and stuff, I mean, they were
Mm.
pretty epic.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty, I
Yeah.
mean, awesome to ride, awesome.
I'm really, you know, I really think the sport misses those slalom tracks that
Yeah.
the Novas had. Like if that was at World Cup, it's the ideal sport for TV and stuff, you know,
Yep.
they get all TV again, and you know, that's so much better than everything else that the filming, I think.
Yeah, and I think EC was right on too with four cross. I mean, I thought four cross was really, really rad.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I mean, yeah. So whoever's out there, needs to come back. Let's go. Let's bring it back.
yeah,
But yeah, so basically through Skippy, he had he had seen at that point it was the evil chain guide, right? It wasn't E13. E13 wasn't even a thing.
Yeah. Where,
Um,
sorry, can I just ask you for everybody, where did the evil name come from?
buddy of mine, Paul Crowther, who was one of the original three founders of Evil, came up with it. Honestly, it was like I was like kind of not comfortable with it. Like I was like it was like a little too edgy for me, but like, but he and my other buddy Ryan convinced, we kind of talked about it, and like he and Paul pulled up in like a night, like the old Burning Skull Evil like logo, like made it like literally overnight, and was there the next morning. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool, like, and
Yeah,
so we kind of we went with it, just roll with it. It was like not a lot of thought, kind of did it.
yeah, brilliant.
It's crazy. Yeah. I don't know. So like it's kind of funny. So that Skippy talked to Rob Roskop about putting the guides on the team bikes for 2001, I want to say, the first year of the V10,
Yeah, yeah,
the red V10, when Jordy was on the team, and it was like Jordy, Panazzo, Waddell,
yeah.
um, who else was on that team?
That's when they had like the light blue and sort of anodized looking.
Yeah, I think they had like a light blue, and then the team bikes were like a red bike, right? Or something like that, or can't
Can't,
remember.
I remember them being, they were on Manitou Dorado Forks, like the intense team I
Yeah,
rode for. I remember them having light blue frames and they ran the
remember that.
intense tires as well.
It was the second year. I don't remember. It could have been the second year.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Anyways, they put it on, but talking to Rob, he was like, "Yeah, but I can't advertise these bikes. I can't like show the bikes in mountain bike action. Like if it has the name Evil on it, like they won't put it in there." And
Ah,
so I was like, "All right, well, we'll just come up with a new brand, I guess." And so that's what we did. And it actually was pretty fortuitous because like E13 went completely bonkers in a span of like 3 years. It was like absurd. We were doing a couple $1 million worth of chain guides and shit. Like in 2 years, it was
ah,
crazy.
yeah,
And so like I kind of just mothballed Evil, like the dirt jumping stuff. Like we were still building like dirt jumping bikes and like, stuff like that.
yeah.
But like we just didn't have the time in the day to do it. Like it was just too much E13 stuff. Like it was too many. We never even like I don't know that we ever even were able to truly fulfill all of the order potential that we had, just because I would double our manufacturing and then the orders would triple, and then it would triple the manufacturing, and then the orders would go, 6 times. Like it was insane.
And where
So
where did you get everything made? Was it always in the same place or was it different places?
so we had our own factory. So uh, I got when we started building. So first, let me back up a little bit. I got a lot of help with this from a few like totally unsung heroes. When I The first bash guards that I built, in the whole poly, building a thermoplastic bash guard, right? It was like kind of unheard of, and like I mean, dude, if I had a nickel for everybody that told me that was like the most dumbass idea ever. Like, right, I would have freaking retired before I even started. Like, so I reached out to in central Massachusetts. There's a huge injection molding hub around Leominster, Massachusetts. Huge, like at the time one of the biggest in the world, and a lot of that stuff is offshore to China now. But like that was a massive USA injection molding hub, and a lot of injection molding technology, and a lot of like stud injection molding guys like lived in that area and whatever. So I started calling just injection molding companies trying to like build of the bash guard stuff. And like that was a really hard product to build because like it's pretty hard to injection mold something of that much mass and
Yeah.
like get it to keep shape and everything. And I got hooked up with this dude named Dave Hellenius, who really took on the project. And like he's the one who really like made it work from like a manufacturing standpoint, and like was able to like really help us build a quality product that like could function the way that we want. Didn't have like weld lines and stuff in it, knit lines that would crack right on. Like when MRP tried to knock us off, years later, they didn't have that didn't have that experience, and everything broke because like they didn't understand the process and how to actually build it. But I was lucky enough to have just this wealth of experience around me,
Mm.
and was able to draw on that and learn and kind of work with them. So they came up with some really innovative processes to like help just help make these things.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Dave happened to have a buddy and who had a small machine shop. So he and his buddies would go there and drink Heinekens and freaking machine bash guards on like one milling machine, like at nights for us. And
Brilliant.
then basically Dave got offered a job to take on to become the president of like a really cool company that did like collapsible injection molding cores, like pins and stuff for like making maybe like making threaded internal, features or like snap ring grooves or something in a, internal boss, which is kind of hard to do injection molding wise. So when he got that offer, he was like, I'm gonna, I gotta sell do you want to buy the shop? And I was like, screw it. So I just bought the whole shop and brought it under our, umbrella and started expanding from there. And we had like 3 machines and like 5 or 6 people, like full time manufacturing at that point,
Brilliant.
like 24 hours almost.